Hello. It is the 3rd of Decem-Baron 2020, and, well, I'm here to talk about my first campaign as a Dungeon Master. So, this is also the first real campaign I was in, Dungeons & Dragons campaign I was involved with after Adventurers League. So, as I said in the last video, with Adventurers League, there were too many people. It was getting a bit frustrating for me as a player trying to survive in that area. So I decided. So me and some of my friends, Jordan included, decided to break off and do our own D&D campaign. We were talking about this before we left that Adventurers League group, trying to figure out what sort of campaign we wanted and who would be the Dungeon Master. Well, I was excited to finally have friends to play Dungeons & Dragons with for the first time ever. And I was excited about the prospect of creating a world. World building, voice acting, that kind of thing. Being a Dungeon Master. Providing a fun adventure for me and my friends. And so, I volunteered to be the Dungeon Master. Again, my only experience with Dungeons & Dragons up to this point was, the only practical experience I had was playing for 3 sessions in Adventurers League in an atypically large group. But also, I did watch a lot of Heroes of Awesome and how they played Dungeons & Dragons. And I got a feel for, what a good Dungeon Master does to, make things exciting, mysterious, kind of building an adventure, some sort of plot out on the fly, on the go, with a little bit of planning, that kind of thing. And so, so I was my group's first Dungeon Master, and I was very excited about that. And so what kind of campaign? We decided to do what I've since learned to be a homebrew campaign. So when you play Dungeons & Dragons, usually there's usually one of 2 main approaches as to what sort of adventure you're going to have. Main, big umbrella categories. First of all, there's the published adventures. An adventure somebody else wrote. Usually Wizards of the Coast, the company who owns Dungeons & Dragons. And there are a lot, and those adventures are fantastic. I've run many of them over the past several years. But the first one was a homebrew campaign. Homebrew meaning made in home. Not exactly strictly adhering to the rules of Dungeons & Dragons, just our own thing, our own world. And I allowed for homebrew races and classes. All I wanted was some sort of theme, something to inform my world-building decisions. We came to Steampunk. We decided that we'd have a Steampunk campaign. I love Steampunk. Anyone who knows that I'm a Scarlet Main in Brawlhalla knows that I love Steampunk stuff. It's just so cool. And so, there we go. Steampunk. Now, looking back on it, it probably wasn't completely steampunk. There were, of course, machines and alchemy and things like that, but I think it was more like fantasy steampunk. I didn't deviate. It wasn't I didn't go into a fully industrialized setting or whatever. It was still a pretty typical fantasy setting with some steampunk elements to it. What I liked from steampunk. So, as I talk about this in this episode of Decem-Baron 2020, I'm going to be referring to some notes that I made, some personal notes I made at the time to remind myself of what that campaign was like. So the campaign was... So I actually gave a title for this campaign. It was called Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons. And a homebrew campaign that was based on steampunk ideas, and I think I came up with that title just a handful of sessions in. Here there be science, here there be dragons. I did not have a full idea of a plot. What I started like session 1, 2, and 3 or whatever, all I had was a town, and that there was a field around it, and that there was a mountain where the capital was sitting on top of it as the capital city, and that was it. It was this town called Wosington, and I essentially built Wosington as well. I used a lot of literature classic literature to inspire my this world that I made. Wosington and the areas around it was inspired by, I should say, not heavily on, but it was inspired by Wizard of Oz type stuff and similar things. So let's see here. So yeah, so the campaign started out. I had all the characters. Oh, by the way, there were several characters that came in and out, but the core group was like we had this alchemist played by Jordan. This alchemist is kind of like this contorted, like hunchback kind of guy, but brilliant, just like kind of a mad scientist kind of thing, and used alchemy. And magic and stuff like that. We had a Warforged, which is basically a walking, talking, and sentient, construct of wood and metal, mostly metal, and who had a vendetta. I don't know if. I think it was the gunslinger who had a vendetta against a certain red dragon, who we named Reem, and so. So these are the 3 core members. Then we had another one who came in with a Rakshasa, which, we were using a fair amount of like homebrew stuff. You don't normally play as a Rakshasa demon, a fiend essentially, but he came in a little bit later. These 4 people, these 4 core players, I still play with 3 of them. One of them went on their own thing, and whenever I see that 4th player, the one who played Booth, it's always a happy reunion. But the ones who played the the one who played the gunslinger, the one who played the Warforged and the alchemist and the Rakshasa, I still play with. So, I still hang out with and stuff like that, and it's great. Although the one who played the alchemist, I see him less often. Whatever. Anyway, so yeah, and there were a few other players here and there. But yeah, we started off in the village of Wosington, and which sits at the foot of Capitol Mountain. On top of the mountain was the capital of the nation, essentially. I didn't have a whole world built out. That was literally all I had. I had a town. I had a couple of towns. I had the local geography, and that was it. I sort of built out from there. And so, we started out with a bunch of some fire-breathing velociraptors were attacking the town. They were being led by kobolds, and so the party subdued the fire-breathing velociraptors, cornered a couple of kobolds, and the kobolds told to try to figure out like where the fire-breathing dinosaurs came from, and so they were led to a kobold cave nearby, which had some traps in it and stuff. And there were 2 chambers at the end of this cave. One chamber had some sort of alchemist workshop, and the other chamber had a caged ankylosaurus, a caged fire-breathing ankylosaurus. That was like the sort of like the boss of the first session. I was so excited about this. I'm just like, you come into this chamber in the cave, and you come across, and I put out like this big miniature, an ankylosaurus. It was actually just I had this figurine of Nick Fury for some reason, and I just put that on there, and it was big enough for the grid to represent how large the Ankylosaurus was, and so, yeah, they beat the Ankylosaurus, and they found some documents on there to that led them to who might have been behind the kobolds and the fire-breathing dinosaurs. The one who was behind the fire-breathing dinosaurs was a war alchemist by the name of Elphaba. By the way, Elphaba is this is one of the many little again hints that I used literature, and in this case Wizard of Oz, because L. Frank Baum is the one who wrote The Wizard of Oz, and Elphaba, LFB, Elphaba, L. Frank Baum. Elphaba is the name of the main, I guess, antagonist of Wicked, the musical Wicked. And so Elphaba is this drow war alchemist who caused the dragons to not dragons, caused the dinosaurs to drink some sort of solution that allowed them to breathe fire. I had lots of other crazy characters as well. I had a halfling. I'm pretty sure the halfling that I named Jawbreaker the Glossy, kind of like this little munchkin, essentially. It just like bothered people, annoyed people with his rantings and his complaining and whatever. But yeah, so what did they do after that? So they tracked down Alphabon at this abandoned fortress a few hours outside of the village of Wosington. And for the dungeon in here, I don't do this as much. I probably should, but like I spent a lot more time back then, meticulously design, figuring out like what would be in the rooms of dungeon. I'd pick up a map from the internet or whatever, and and I had like a whole theme around like this whole this dungeon where they went through to find Elphabon, and among the many other like traps and creatures that the players went against, they came across a clockwork black dragon like statue mounted on a wall that recited these menacing stanzas. The ancient earth they now subdue with order and appliance. All they, refuse, declare on cue, here there be science. Yet soon the vernal sun shall fall, will fill the bitter flagons. When all the world shall weep and wail, here there be dragons. Yet soon the vernal sun shall fail, will fill the bitter flagons. When all the world shall weep and wail, here there be dragons. So, I had a lot of fun with all of this. This whole campaign was nuts. They finally met Elphabon at the end. They were able to capture him. Like he used a bunch of potions and stuff like that, trying to get at them. Kind of like how Plague Knight does in Shovel Knight, honestly. Although I was not familiar with Shovel Knight at the time. But yeah, they were able to finally capture Elphabon, and they wanted to take him to the capital to basically like have him like imprisoned, essentially. So they went. So up the mountain, there was a sort of it's a bit of a travel to go up the mountain, up onto the capital on the top of the mountain. Excuse me. Sorry. And so, they went to like a checkpoint, like a little fortress, kind of halfway up the mountain. Elphabon tried several times to escape, and to no avail. Actually, Elphabon they tied him up really well, but they had his hands like this. And I had Elphabon have some rings where if he like ate the jewels and crushed them in his if he crushed them in his teeth, it would allow him to be like a gaseous form. He had like a potion of gaseous form, and he tried to consume that. However, the Warforged was keeping watch over him, and they basically like took this big like board and just like as a big fan, like instead of allowing the gaseous form to try to escape, they used like this big fan, just like use the air to keep the gaseous form of Elphabon into the corner. And I'm like, well, you're going to be tired, aren't you? And like, nope, he's a Warforged. Warforged don't need to sleep. They don't get physically tired. So I'm just like, okay, you spend all night, fanning the gaseous form into a corner. Or maybe it was only an hour or something like that. But yeah, they go up into the capital. They meet lots of characters and stuff. They meet this female dwarf clerk, inspecting their paperwork and stuff like that. There's kind of like they had some issues at the checkpoint. There's a guy named Mr. Sewer who just sort of like, was wary of them and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they meet my character, Yarhara Tintinabula. I had him as an NPC, a non-player character in there. And And they also come across a pair of adventurers, Arhan and Spork. Arhan was a red dragonborn ranger, and Spork was this half orc bard who uses a lance and had the bagpipe under his arm. He plays that bagpipe while he's charging at the lance. But yeah, so the two of them were trying to hunt Reem, the red dragon, and so yeah, they figure out that Arhan has a fierce rivalry. Arhan wants to try to find Reem, and that Reem has a fierce rivalry with Argon, which is the name of the Lord of the Fire Giants, essentially. So Arhan and Spork, they've been working for Yarheritinge Nebula and whatever, and they've also been helpful in several other excursions in this campaign. But the trail led to the Sweetmeats Factory, which is right outside of the village of Wosington. The Sweetmeats Factory is a candy factory, and this I used Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as inspiration for all the different puzzles and things like that. But yeah, they I'm looking over my notes to make sure I'm got everything. But yeah, there were a few puzzles in there and stuff like that. At a certain point, they came across a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was charging at them in the factory, and so then after eventually beating that, and trying to navigate through all the machinery, they finally found who was in charge of the Sweetmeats Factory, and it was this Rakshasa named Jalo Wiska, and Jalo used to be a friend of the player character who was a Rakshasa, Jerome. And but Jerome doesn't like Jalo, but Jalo's like, "Hey, what's up?" and everything. And I even made a really fun rhyme about this. So Jalo Wiska, this was another boss essentially, where but yeah, the J-Lo had a couple of golems just kind of slam onto the ground from the ceiling, and a gelatinous cube fell down on each of the golems. The golems were making this noise. They were and because they were inside the gelatinous cubes, it was actually more of a. It was muted because of the gelatinous cubes, and so they were essentially making some kind of beat for J-Lo Wiska, and J-Lo with the from the golems and the gelatinous cube combinations, J-Lo recited this: "Ayo, ayo, 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 yo! Welcome to this funky town show. As you're trying to rock and shock a rock shaksa, how can we get this party to move along faster? Ayo, say hello to the Vibe Squad. Like a dope cantaloupe, it should be outlawed. Now Jerome back at home with his crazy cat J-Lo. We can vibe side by side like the good times. Ayo!" And the players had none of that. They were able to finally beat J-Lo as well, and a couple of the halflings that they rescued in the factory, they became the new owners of the Sweetmeats Factory and everything. So the next sort of main thing or whatever, I'm glossing over a lot of details. I'm just trying. I don't want this to go for too long, but I'm trying to hit the highlights of here there be science, here there be dragons. But yeah, the next main thing is that they look to try to find Reem, the red dragon. They figured it'd be good to contact Argon, the Lord of the Fire Giants, to figure out how to find Reem, right? His arch nemesis. And so they meet with Argon, and what they do is they find out that, actually they want to see if they can convince Argon to join forces with them against Reem. And Argon just sort of laughs at them, essentially, saying Reem is no longer a concern of his. Reem is no longer my concern. He's no longer in this world. Another dragon has taken Reem's place, Archon the Black Dragon. And as a matter of fact, Archon and myself are joint rulers of the Fury. And, the Fury is essentially this sort of like group of like monsters that are trying to take over the world and stuff. They have some plot and stuff like that. They're able to let's see what happened. They're able to defeat Argon in spite of the great sword and the gargantuan boulders being thrown and everything. A bunch of stuff happened with Alphabon as well, but they eventually, Alphabon was kind of like serving the Fury, essentially. Alphabon was serving J-Lo, and J-Lo was serving the Fury, and they show the head of Argon to Alphabon, and Alphabon was just like, shocked, really. And then, Alphabon didn't want to deal directly with the Black Dragon, and so the players go over there to fight the Black Dragon. I will say the players leveled up pretty quickly over this, and because I allowed homebrew races and classes, they were also a bit overpowered, which was fine in this case because it was just fun. It was just fun to have this hilarious, these huge like battles and stuff like that. Anyway, they fight the Black Dragon, Archon. But more stuff, more stuff happening and everything. When they finally reach Archon and they fight him, they find out Archon has a lackey, a sorcerer or like a warlock, a dragonborn warlock named Aryon. Archon, Aryon, very Argon, very clever, right? I don't know why I had all those names, but the servant Aryon stands to the side watching the Black Dragon, just like tries to like defeat the players, but nope, Archon falls down dead, and Aryon. So there's a huge treasure hoard there, but before the players can quite enjoy that, Aryon creates a portal that sends the players out into a different plane of existence. And they find out this new plane of existence that they're in, which is actually Mechanus, is where Reem is. They find out that Reem, so Mechanus is like the plane of law and order. There are all these constructs called modrons that work like literal clockwork, there's different, there's a very strict hierarchy of the modrons, and at the very top is the Primus. And they found out that Reem, the ancient red dragon, replaced the Primus. And so, that, of course, led to them fighting Reem as the Primus. And finally, they're able to defeat Reem and restore the original Primus to his position as the ruler of Mechanus and set everything back in order. They're able to come back into... they're able to come back to the capital, and they find out that actually a few years have gone by. The time didn't quite work out the same between Mechanus and the real world. And so, let's see. All kinds of... what else sort of happened? They find out that there's some sort of plot going on in the capital. There's a half-orc by the name of Borak who tried to usurp some power and things like that. Borak being a corrupt official or sort of something like that. There's a point where just as the sun was shining on a spring festival, Borak made some sort of speech, And I remember this session quite well. Borak made a speech, and a big giant portal opened up above the city, and all kinds of monsters like dragons and all that kind of stuff spilled out of the portal and out into the world to wreak havoc and mayhem and destruction and everything. The capital itself was also lifted up through the portal, lifted from the mountain into the portal, and everyone was freaking out and everything. However, and now the whole city of the capital is, and as well as the players in the capital, are stuck in the astral plane. And the people in the capital are in a panic, of course. They see all kinds of crazy portals to other planes and things like that. They follow Borak to a different plane. They hop through from the astral plane to other planes and whatever. They finally defeat Borak, send him back dead into the material plane, and they even meet the god of tyranny, Asmodeus. Now I know in D&D lore that most D&D lore, Asmodeus is like the Lord of the Devils. He wasn't the Lord of the Devils in this case. He's I had him as the god of tyranny essentially. But yeah, they how did that even work? Through some was it through bargaining or was it fighting or whatever? Actually, okay, what happened was they were able to escape from Asmodeus. They resolved to beat Asmodeus at one point, but not now. They needed to help the people in the capital, still drifting in the astral plane. And so they tell the people in the in the capital to go through the portal that leads back to back to the normal world, the material plane. And so the whole population of the capital went back into Wosington, turning the village of Wosington into the town of Wosington, and basically Wosington became the new capital of the nation, essentially. But yeah, that fulfilled the prophecy of the vernal sun failing. Here there be dragons. The portal opened up, blocking the sun, and a bunch of dragons and creatures came in to wreak havoc upon the world. I know this is not all full the best thought out story, but this is the first one I had as a dungeon master, as a homebrew dungeon master, and we just all had a lot of fun anyway. We didn't care too much. We just were having fun in what we were doing. There was another kind of encounter with a bunch of giants in that who took up residence in that Kobold cave later on, and then eventually it came to be that after about a dozen sessions, some of the players took me aside and said that they felt that this campaign had pretty much run its course. They fought the villains they wanted to. They fought Reem. They fought a fire giant. They fought all these obstacles. They felt that they were ready to have this campaign come to a conclusion pretty soon, so that we could, as a group, start a new one and have someone else be the DM. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so here is basically for one reason or another, the group ended up at the same fortress that they captured Elphabon in. And actually, first of all, Jordan's character, the alchemist, he decided that in his character something would snap in his mind, and he would just kind of decide, he had all this wealth and fame and glory in Wosington, but he would give all this fame away and all this wealth away to the town of Wosington. And to the three elders of Wosington. The three elders were Leo, Pharaoh, and who was the other one? Leo, Pharaoh, and Bacal. Those three characters and NPCs were modeled after a lion, a scarecrow, and a Tin Man, essentially. More of literature stuff. But yeah, a Wizard of Oz stuff. But yeah. the alchemist, named Betterborn, by the way, but just kind of like something snapped in him. And also, Jerome the Rakshasa decided they wanted to basically go against the rest of the party and just like have this like final epic battle in that fortress. And like I think they were going to fight Aryon, the sorcerer servant of the Black Dragon. But like chaos just kind of unfolded in that fight against the evil dragon sorcerer. The alchemist and the Rakshasa were fighting against their fellows, and like Aryon was confused and all that kind of stuff, and Aryon just kind of let stuff happen. Aryon had a staff of the Magi, which was a very powerful magical staff. It could do lots of things, but among other things, something bad could happen if you snap it in half, like bring it over your knee, snap it, and break the staff. And that's exactly what happened. The alchemist broke the staff, and an explosion happened. And the characters to sort of conclude the campaign either got killed or got transported to some other plane of existence. The alchemist ended up in Carcery, which was a prison for evil people, essentially. Where did other people go? Some people ended up in like other plane, like more neutral or good planes, like Mechanus or Mount Celestia, things like that. So yeah, I hope that was sort of like a coherent explanation of here there be science, here there be dragons. But suffice it to say that all these crazy things, like just it was me and the players experimenting like together as a group, me experimenting as a DM with just random fun things, and it certainly would not be my last homebrew campaign or several others. But yeah, just all sorts of like crazy like tomfoolery, like out of this world, like fighting an ancient dragon, fighting a fire giant, fighting just all this crazy stuff and all these crazy characters that I still love to this day, and I hope to be able to use them in future campaigns of mine. But yeah, here there be science, here there be dragons. My very first campaign, like full campaign, as a dungeon master, as a player as an enthusiast of Dungeons and Dragons, and yeah, what else is there to say about that? I just had a lot of fun with it. Oh yeah, so Jordan, the one who played that alchemist, and he and the Rakshasa like betrayed the rest of the party by fighting against them at the very end. That would not be Jordan, the player. That would not be Jordan's last betrayal against the party. There are two other instances where, like, at the last session, essentially, his character would betray the party, which is hilarious. So I'll share those other stories some other time. But yeah, that was my first campaign as the Dungeon Master, and my first full campaign in Dungeons and Dragons. So thank you all very much for watching and listening. And, well, until next time, all the best.